interest of any Western nation because it didn't deliver anything for them other than misery and chaos. And in fact, if you look into the history of regime change, not only did it come about because of Benjamin Netanyahu saying that he wanted the West to replace diplomacy with a war on terror from 1979, but when it went on to do this, what did it produce? The reason we have a mass migration crisis in Europe is because of the wars in the Middle East that the United States has wholeheartedly fought, which serves only the grand strategy of the Israelis. That's the reason why you had millions of people come into Europe in 2015 from Syria. That's the reason why, as Colonel Gaddafi predicted in 2010, he went on French television and said, if you kill me, Europe will turn black. And then in Operation Odyssey Dawn, when they did kill him, when Hillary Clinton and David Cameron killed Gaddafi, rather brutally, Europe did turn black because Libya was a gateway that wasn't open then. And so was Syria. And then so was Iraq. And so when you smash these countries, what happens? People flee and routes are established, and that becomes a business. Mass migration is a criminal enterprise. It's a racket. People pay thousands of dollars to be shipped into your country. This becomes a parallel economy. It's part of the corrupting influence of the business of mass destruction itself. And when people are beginning to see that now, because they're seeing that it's going to make changes in their pocket, the price of their petrol, the availability of their food through the scarcity of fertilizer, the cost of living is going to go up. Governments like the Labour Party, and probably like Reform, are going to borrow more in order to defray those costs, which will further devalue the value of your money, making it harder and harder to survive. It's a death spiral. Fundamentally, the decades of regime change wars that I've seen have changed one regime more than most, and that's our own. Because I remember when we used to live in a sane, functioning, stable, and relatively happy country. And now it's terrible. And all these policies have been undertaken which have created this nightmare. And it's the political consensus that was formed after 1945 that's done this to us. And the reason why none of these parties have any answers to these problems is because they are the problem and not the solution. And if they ever name the fact that it's their policies that have caused this, they're finished. And I think reality's making that argument now, and they know they're finished. And this is why you see the elites in the United States cashing out through a series of well-documented financial trades timed to statements always made on Fridays just before the markets closed, like we saw yesterday, saying that peace is coming. This is so bad that the Federal Securities Commission is investigating the President of the United States and his inner circle for insider trading now, because it's obvious. So you're ruled by something that looks very much like a fanatical crime syndicate that does things that destroys everyone's lives, makes these wonderful promises to them, whether from the left or the right. But in the end, what you get is chaos and war and open borders and mad slogans and the outright denial of reality. And it's not good enough because we have to live in the mess they made.
What's the Twitter for Frank?
Yeah, the Twitter is Frank Reiter, R-I-G-H-T-E-R, Frank Reiter. And inevitably, depressingly, I have a Substack. And I do videos for LifeSite News.
That guy is spot on. I like Frank Reiter. Frank Wright, actually. Reiter is what he has on Twitter and on Substack. And he wrote this article here, Magageddon. And again, we talk about the wars in various areas driving the mass migration into Europe, the UK, as well as the United States. Just take a look at Venezuela, our great triumph, according to Trump, right? He wants to make Venezuela the 51st state. It wasn't that long ago that they were concerned about Venezuelan migrants who were coming here as swatters. Remember the guy that allegedly worked for Venezuelan intelligence service? I mean, we've got a lot of Marxists there who hate this country, who hate everything that America is about. Of course, there's other people from Venezuela who don't, but nevertheless, you want to pull all those people in and make them the 51st state? This is what Trump wants to do. So, yeah, it is a death spiral. He is absolutely right about that. The only question is it murder or suicide as this is happening? He said what the strategic defeat of the U.S. and Israel and Iran means, showing that the post-9/11 vision for U.S. global domination led to another impossible dream, to make America great again using military power. And as he points out, whenever you look at empires who decide they're going to use military power to make themselves great, it never is able to be sustained. He says it's just a matter of time before the profound financial, military, and economic shocks produced by Trump's war for Israel will be felt in the United States. Again, they're hoping that I think that this is going to happen after the election. When you start to make these kinds of massive changes, what happens when we've got something that's really massive? You know, like the Titanic or something large like that. It's got a lot of inertia. It takes a great deal of time to get it started, but once it's started on a course, it's difficult to change course, sometimes impossible to change course in time. That's what happened to the Titanic. And what we have right now is a Titanic disaster from the Trump administration. Whether you're talking about tariffs and economics, that tariff, that Titanic trajectory that we're on towards the iceberg, or whether you're talking about what's going on with Iran and the military and economic consequences of that. In both cases, it's this massive ship estate that has a tremendous amount of inertia and cannot steer away from the iceberg in time. And I should mention, sorry that we lost power there. For something happened here to glitch it, and we're saying we've got to get a whole slew of UPSs to try to stop that, because we got power plugged into a lot of different disjointed places, not just one. So we need to get a lot of other UPS systems here so we can weather that. But it was just a temporary glitch. That's what happened to the broadcast there. We'll piece that together for people who want to watch it in repetition when it's not live. But he goes on to say, this looks like the end of the world as Americans knew it. The impact of this war, this is one that is not a case of viewing explosions in some distant desert. And again, this has been the American experience for these wars. We saw it with Desert Storm and all the rest of the stuff. We just watch vicariously like it's some kind of a video game. We don't think about the people that are involved in it. Of course, in the Gulf War, it was against a military that was there. Now what we're doing is we're watching very callously as civilian populations are being destroyed. We just had a massive event in Russia where they attacked, the Ukrainians attacked a school, killed a very small percentage of people compared to just one of the attacks against schools on the opening salvo of the Iranian war. Killed 21 kids, which is 21 too many. Quite a few were injured. There may be more casualties than that. The response from the Russians was that we cannot negotiate with these people. We're getting to that point. I mean, that's what he was talking about, what Frank Wright was talking about when he said the United States has gotten to the point where, just like Israel, they can't be trusted to keep their agreements. They can't be trusted to negotiate in good faith. They can't be trusted to not sneak attack you while they're negotiating with you. They can't be trusted not to try to assassinate the negotiators who are there. And so when you get to that point, what's left? You just have a perpetual war. That's what the Middle East has been for a long time. Now we are adopting the strategies of Israel in terms of fighting that war. And what we're creating is a kind of Hatfields versus McCoy blood feud that's just going to go on without end when you go down that path. And so what happened is we had a retaliation in Iran from the Russians for these schools, and it was horrific what happened. This kind of stuff, folks, can happen to us in America. Look at these things coming down. This is missiles coming down. Listen to this. They're hitting, and if you count where they hit and the amount of time it takes for the sound to get there, they may be about 9 or 10 miles away. And here they are. You can hear them finally. This is the consequences of it, folks. This is what happens when you have wars. Now, so far we have been shielded against this, but there's absolutely no reason to think that America is not going to be attacked by the kind of asymmetric warfare with drones that we have seen happening back and forth between Ukraine and Russia against infrastructure, against civilian populations. This has now become standard to attack civilians. Look at this one. This is continuing on the next day. It's really amazing. You just hear them, boom, and it comes in. This is, they think it's Oreshnik missiles that are coming in, for which they have absolutely no defense. And we have no defense for our military bases. Colonel McGregor was on an interview, and the guy pulled up a map, and he showed all of these military bases that we have put in over the decades surrounding Iran. And he goes, which of these military bases are still viable? And Colonel McGregor said, well, none of them are. They've all been attacked. We've had the central nervous system, if you will, of the anti-missile defense system was taken out at the very beginning of this. It was so bad, of course, and it's been reported now by multiple sources that in some of these bases, they had to remove the American military personnel, put them in hotels because they couldn't defend the base. And that's what Colonel McGregor was saying. He said the warfare has changed now so that you can't protect these bases. Think about that. The rapidly changing tactics of warfare have changed so quickly that military bases that are forward positioned like that have become something of a liability. It's kind of like the battleship that no longer really functions, and that happened in World War II. The battleships that had been so important up to that point in time were no more important. It was the aircraft carriers that were important. Well, now all of these types of things are changing very, very rapidly. They're changing the calculus of military power and how wars are fought, even to the extent that military bases abroad are a liability and not a way to project power. And so he says the impact of this war is going to be one of not viewing these explosions in a distant desert. The war is a tremendous mistake, which is unintentionally delivering what MAGA promised to do, to permanently resize and to rebalance U.S. commitments and grand strategy. Yeah, if these people who lust for power can't voluntarily shut down this American empire, it'll be shut down as all empires have been shut down in the past. It'll be shut down by its own overreach. The Greek word apocalypse means something that is uncovering or a revelation. So something that was hidden, a mystery or whatever, and now it is being revealed, right? That's why we look at the last book of the New Testament. They call it, it's not the revelation or the apocalypse about the end of the world. That's the way it's treated by a lot of people who look at it in the same way that they would consult the Witch of Endor on divination. No, it was actually, the title was The Revelation of Jesus Christ. That's what Revelation is really about. It's not about Israel, it's about Jesus Christ. But again, we see this theology that has poisoned American Christianity, this dispensationalism that treats the end of the world as being all about Israel and not about the summation of history in the Lord Jesus Christ. He is the summation of the Old Testament. He is the summation of the prophecies. He is the summation of the end of time. But we look at it from the wrong position, even calling it revelations, multiple, right? Because there's going to be a lot of different revelations about things that are going to happen at the end of the world. No, that's the wrong way to read it. It's about revealing Christ from different perspectives. After months of obvious lies from the White House about the reasons for this war, its conduct, its losses, its consequences, it's hard to fathom where the big lie began. Perhaps it began with the noble lie of MAGA itself. Liberal democracy is the marketing of the elite agenda to the masses through the mobilization of popular sentiment. That's why when somebody said, well, if all these elections are rigged, why do they bother to do them at all? Well, again, at some level, there is competition. And that exists there at a level in the same way that you had the intelligence agencies in the late 1990s as switching circuitry advanced and the internet as we know it today started to come to fruition. Again, it had been talked about since the early 1960s by DARPA psychologist J.C.R. Licklider. So they had this idea of what they wanted to do. They didn't have the technology. As the technology began to come online, they set up their own venture capital firm, Incutel, by the CIA. They also put all these different people from the CIA, NSA, and all these intelligence agencies, they put them on the board of directors. How do you think these corporations operated for decades, losing money? That's how. They were underwritten by the government. They, however, picked who the competitors were going to be and then said to them, all right, now you compete amongst yourself because we want the strongest ones to win. But they made sure that the only certain people were allowed to participate in it. That's the way the elections are set up. And as they turn these elections into selections, they want to use it also to build a consensus. See, you all voted for this. It may be that you got a record turnout of 20% of the people who showed up for your primary. But hey, I've got a mandate now because I got more than 50% of the 20% of the people who showed up. So I got 10% of the people who allegedly voted for me, whether that's real or not, whether that's based on any real information or whether it's based on lies and propaganda, whether it's based on actual votes or padding of votes, whatever the purpose. Now I've got, let's say 10.5% of the people who live here have put me in. And now I get to rule like a dictator. Well, that's what liberal democracy has become. He said MAGA was the sale of Trumpian populism on promises of national renewal and restoration of America's greatness. This was a sales pitch. An initially impressive team of strategists put together a new realism to produce what J.D. Vance called a foreign policy for the American middle class. A new era was promised of realism and restraint, because we all know how these foreign wars are destroying this country. So what was the solution? Well, they promised restraint. What have we seen from Trump? We have seen the most in-your-face, adventurous administration in terms of one war after the other that I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, he's not even finished with his failed war with Iran while they are talking about how they're going to go to Cuba next. I guess they figure they can have an easy victory there to erase the memory, the bitter taste of this Iranian war. This was a tacit acceptance that the U.S. had not won and could not win in the world, and admitted the regime change era had ruined America. MAGA really came from the recognition that the U.S. had bankrupted itself both financially and morally, and following a grand strategy aimed at becoming and remaining the only global power. This vision materialized in the 1989 fall of the Berlin Wall and was presented in a Rand paper a year later. And, supposedly the end of history and so forth. And this vision, the regime change wars for Israel and Libya and the Middle East, made strategic and even financial sense, as did the attempt to overextend and unbalance Russia with the war in Ukraine. Victory would gift the West the boon of massive mineral resources to defray the mortgage that it had taken out to secure them. And again, you see Trump openly talking about this. Well, take the oil. Take the oil from Syria. Take the oil from Venezuela. I mean, he literally has called himself a pirate because he is. He understands what he's doing. It's MAGA. They're the only ones who don't see this. And so they're still selling this lie. MAGA media is using this lie that, hey, we get the oil, as trying to present what is going on in Iran and Venezuela as a victory. Hey, if we blow up the world's oil supply in the Middle East, that'd be great for us because we still have our oil. It's insane. We have been trained to distrust the obvious and to disregard reality. So it always comes as a shock to be confronted by what in place of what we've been led to believe ought to be there instead. The Soviet Union was the number one military power in the world. What happened to them? I remember when all this stuff happened, and we had conservatives at the time who said, well, that's just it. It was a centrally planned, controlled economy. They were not focused on helping their people. They were not focused on economic growth because they were not focused on freedom. You try to centrally plan and centrally control an economy, and it's going to turn out this way. And yet now we have conservatives out there who, when Trump starts doing this, when he starts acting like China, well, that's great. We got to be like China in order to beat China. We have to beat the monster in order we have to become the monster in order to defeat the monster. That is not true. America has always been able to survive because we had freedom, because we had a free market. The path to prosperity, the path to a strong nation, is done by a nation of shopkeepers, a nation of small businesses, a nation where somebody can have an idea and they have the freedom to be able to do it instead of having government regulators keeping their boot on your throat. But of course, that's not the position of conservatives today. The position of conservatives today is that the government should take a controlling interest in Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, TSMC, or in Intel, or maybe even in NVIDIA. and we should be partners with them, and we should make money with them. This is the Chinese fascist communist model, and this is what Trump is adopting. This is what destroyed the Soviet Union. When you are focused on guns and not butter, and of course the government can't produce anything. This is why Gerald Celente always says, the business of China is business, the business of America is the military. That was what the Soviet Union did. That's what led to their defeat. Frank Wright is absolutely right about this, and so is Gerald Celente. By the way, use the code NIGHT at Trends Journal to save 10% on Gerald Celente's trends. He's another one who understands where this came from and where it is going. Thank you for joining us on this Memorial Day. Have a good holiday. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.
Using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show. You're listening to The David Knight Show. You're listening to The David Knight Show.